Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Shay with Amos. I'm your host, Jacob Gorgie. We're going to add that, James, make a note. We're going to add that to the list of stuff we're going to break this season. There's going to be a lot of new stuff this season. I'm very excited for it, and I hope you guys are too. With that said, today's guest is someone that I think a lot of our viewers might know, but if you don't know, her name is Nermien Riad. Welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Jacob. Thank you.
No problem. So, let's start from the beginning.
Okay.
Immigrating from Egypt to America. What was that story?
That story began with my father's determination to leave Egypt. So my father actually was a journalist, and under the regime of Nasser. During that time, there was no freedom of thought, no freedom of expression. And I remember as a little girl seeing Dad and his friends whispering. And I'd always wonder, why are they whispering? And they would say, because the walls have ears. And as a little girl, I would look everywhere, and I never found those ears. So he was determined to leave Egypt. And to the extent where his family was saying, why bother? You're near retirement. Yeah, and he was an older man, but he says, no, for my children. And so he did what he had to do and struggled until he was able to leave. And in 1971, we all left Egypt and came to the murder capital of the world, New York City.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Chicago. Okay.
Probably at that time, it was
It was probably DC. No, you know where it was? It was New Jersey. We're gonna have a very mad treasurer.
So here we were in a very strange land, a very strange strange land, strange country, and I tell you how the strange land it is. People would drink their tea cold. Not only was it cold, but they'd put ice in it. I mean, who would drink their Shay with ice?
We've done that on the show a few times.
So this was all very unusual to us.
Yeah.
And I remember something else that was really strange about this country was when fights would break out in school, elementary school, people would egg them on. Yeah, hit them harder. Whereas in Egypt, you try to pull people apart. Here, it's like, no, do more.
Egypt sounds kind of boring. I'm not gonna lie. That's kind of
sounds rather boring. So this is kind of where we found ourselves. I mean, the good thing was that there was a church. There was a church in New York, and so there was, at least some semblance, of what we're used to. But that community, mom and dad, and that whole community had to persevere to succeed. Mom learned to drive. You're talking about a young woman from Beni Suef who, worked in Egypt. She was also a journalist, but, why would she learn to? No, she learned to drive. She changed her career from also she was a journalist to now accounting. I mean, she does not going to be able to write, et cetera. And so what was remarkable about that is their determination to succeed for their children. Then what took us from New York to Washington was my father's heart condition. His heart deteriorated, and the only place where they would do open heart surgery practically in the United States was in the National Institute of Health, NIH, in Washington, D.C. So he went there for open heart surgery, and it was back and forth until they thought, wait a minute, why travel so much? And hence after 2 years living in New York, we then came to Washington. Washington, no community, no church. Where are the Copts? Where are the Egyptians? Where is anybody? There was no one. And what was beautiful about that is the formation of that community. Little by little, one by one, you know how they found each other? They'd overhear Arabic in the mall, and they'd go running out and says, I heard you speak Arabic. Are you Egyptian? Yes. Oh, and are you Copt? Because most of the Egyptians were Copts at the time. Are you Copt? Yes. Oh, let me get your number, etc. And then they would meet for Bible study. And every Friday they'd meet, and somebody's turn to give Bible study. Still no church, no abuna, nothing. And then they continued to rent a church one Saturday a month. They would borrow an abuna from somewhere. And this is how they started that very, very first community.
So, as you grew up with the congregation, when did you feel like you had a church like established? Was it when the congregation grew, or was when like the actual like building was built?
I think in the sense, I mean, the community again, whether they were doing Bible studies in the evenings, Friday evenings, or renting a church once a month and borrowing an abuna. And a lot of times, the plane would be delayed, and so we'd get the call, no liturgy today. It was just a very very turbulent time for what you would say a Coptic community. But once that all the people pulled in their money at great personal risk to themselves. I mean, they were more worried, more concerned about buying a house for God than a house for themselves. And why? For our children. And so when the church, it's a tiny little small church, was bought in 1979. January, the liturgy, the Eid liturgy, was the first liturgy that was prayed at St. Mark's, Washington, D.C., with our very own Abuna there. That was really the establishment of the church. I'll tell you something, the church was very small. And Princess Diana was getting married about the same time. And so, of course, we would joke and say if Princess Diana married at St. Mark's, D.C., half of her dress would be in the parking lot. So that's how small the church was.
Yeah. So I think this kind of helps transition into Coptic Orphans, because, to be very honest, I'm quite fascinated with this organization. So I kind of want to start, first of all, with how the idea came about. Because if I remember, we do pre-interviews, so like, we know what we're going to talk about. But I remember when we were talking earlier, you were young, like you were in college, or
yeah, college. So because of this immigrant journey, and because of seeing mom and dad suffering, taking the bulk of it, and us getting the rewards of it, the sense of being indebted to God, and as David the prophet says, how can I repay you, Lord, for all the good that you have done? And so that desire to do something for God continued, and God opened a door. How did that happen? In college, flipping through a magazine, it said sponsor a child. And I was like, oh, this is really nice. I'd love to sponsor a child. But where will I get $18 every month to sponsor a child? So I forced 5 of my friends, each one at $3, and we began to sponsor. I graduated university, went to Egypt, and a friend took me to an orphanage. And this was the first time ever in my life to see an orphanage, and I learned about poverty and such. And then it hit me, wait a minute, why am I sponsoring a child in some very faraway country when these girls here themselves may need help? Tasoni, do you mind if I take their photo and get their story and start to help? Not at all, not at all. And that's the beginning of Coptic Orphans. We started with 45 children. Today, over 86,000 children's lives have been touched.
Yeah, so, I mean, the journey must be incredible, because it was established in, I want to make sure.
1988.
Okay, cool. I didn't want to say the wrong date. Yeah. So, I mean, this is almost 40 years, if not about 40 years worth of work. So, as this non-for-profit grew, or actually NGO, that's the correct term, guys. NGO, remember that. I mean, it couldn't have been easy.
Couldn't have been easy.
No, it couldn't have been.
Wasn't easy.
Right, so as it grew, first of all, was the growth marginal? Or was it, how do I say this? Like, was it kind of flat and one day just spiked up to, not to where it is today, but like in kind of incremental spikes? Or as it just went on, it slowly kind of curved up to the growth that we see today?
So let me tell you about how it was difficult, or some of the challenges that we faced. In several points of time, there was a fork in the road. One of them was we're all volunteers, so all of us did this on the side. We're all working full time and helping out on the side. So the point of the first person to be hired It was actually a Chinese lady that we hired to do administrative work. But it was a big decision at the time. Do we spend money on someone's salary or do we keep it completely volunteer? And that made a big difference, of course, but it was quite challenging at the time. Another challenge that came up was do I now leave my work? So I've been doing Coptic Orphans for 12 or 13 years as a volunteer. And it was sort of like God saying, step out of the boat. I go, I'm not stepping out of the boat. I'm not leaving the government. No, I've got a mortgage. I've got, obligations. And God saying, step out of the boat. And I was like, okay, but give me a life jacket. And indeed, he gave me a life jacket. And the life jacket was that I took time off of work, leave without pay from the government, and then to try it out. And then indeed, it worked out well. So continued that way. So that was a really big challenge at the time. And then one other challenge was getting registered as an international NGO in Egypt. You fill out the paperwork. They tell you it should take 6 months.
Yeah.
7.5 years, we're still going, trying to get registration. And of course, there's all the naysayers of the organization and within, and at that point as well. There was the gentleman that was the ambassador that I was working with there in Egypt says, Nermien, you will never get registered here. Flat out, like this. And he was a man of influence and such.
Yeah.
My response was, Your Excellency, with all due respect, the women in my family live to 90. I have another 50 years. I think I will get registered. So it's really by God's grace that you persevere through all of these challenges. And the time that you realize that Coptic Orphans managed to reach a certain level was... you struggle to raise money. You struggle, year after year to raise money. And the one year that we hit $1 million was the time I said to God, let your servant depart in peace. I have seen yourself. I need nothing more. There's nothing more I could wish for, nothing more I can. And that was the time you felt like, wow, Coptic Orphans was lit. But God had more plans and it continued to grow phenomenally.
Yeah. And I'm actually glad you mentioned this because we didn't touch on this when we were talking earlier, but I found an article and it was about your time in the UN. So, first of all, because I'm a little familiar with the UN. I actually went to the UN building in New York for the conferences there, so I got to see. We were in the General Assembly Hall. It was really cool. What committee were you on, speaking on, or was it? It was a general assembly. I didn't really read into it, but I was curious.
So, Coptic Orphans managed to attain consultative status as an NGO with the United Nations. And as such, there are opportunities to speak. And it was actually at the General Assembly that they asked for only 4 NGOs. And we applied, and we got it. And so I think what was beautiful about that is on the world stage, people heard about the Copts. They learned about the Copts. They heard about how difficult of a struggle that they had to survive, and yet they survive and they flourish, and they do wonderful things for their country. So I was very proud of that.
Yeah. Was it, it must have been nerve-wracking, going in because was it one of those committees where you were just sitting and just, press the button microphone, or were you up on the actual,
sitting
election?
And press the button.
Oh, okay, no, never mind. Okay, yeah.
No, we're not there yet.
Oh, okay.
But it's God's will to be there.
Well, the reason why I take interest in this in particular is because, we hear a lot, especially in the States, we're all about freedom, right? So we hear a lot about, Coptic identity, showing the world who we are, right? And you're one of the, I don't want to say one of the few people, but you are one of the few people that did it, that went in front of a world stage and did that. And personally, that resonated with me. I'm sorry. So, but that does lead on to my outlook question. So throughout your time in Coptic Orphans, it has been difficult. If you're Coptic Orthodox watching this, you're well aware of Egyptian-Copt relation. We all know this, right? So as you were struggling for the name of Christ, what advice would you give to those who are going to be facing a similar tribulation? Because here in the States, our tribulation is, oh, they mistaked us for the wrong Christian, right? Or, you know, like, they think we're Greek Orthodox, right? This is different. But we don't really face life-altering tribulation. Thank God. But to those who may, what advice would you give them?
You know, I think the kind of tribulations that we would be facing is apathy. Is, do I really care? Does it matter? Why should I sacrifice my time, my energy? And this is, you don't want to be in that position. You want to be giving of yourself, giving time, giving energy for the sake of Christ. And once you're in there, God himself will give you resilience. You know, you just have to have the heart to say, I want to serve you, God, and it's okay to fail. And it's okay to get lost, and it's okay, but just stay in the game. As Simon Sinek says, stay in the game. It's all about don't quit. Keep at it, and don't expect grand things and grand accomplishments. No, one small thing, and God will show you those small accomplishments that keep you going, that gives you joy, and that you know brings joy to God's heart.
Did you ever feel like quitting?
You know, interestingly, never.
Oh, okay.
Interestingly, never. It's too much part of my DNA. It's too much passion. It's too much. You know, can a father think about, you know, giving up his child? No.
Yeah.
And all of that is by God's grace.
Well, that's all I have for today.
Great.
Thank you all so much for watching. We have an amazing season coming up, by the way. This is like the first of many awesome guests, so make sure you guys stick around. Otherwise, though, that's all we have for today. Thank you all so much for watching. God bless, and good night.